And thank you for voting this. This is a no-code, pure application talk. So even voting and coming and seeing you here is a great honor. It's also a great honor because I'm on my first day post-retirement. I retired exactly yesterday. So there you are. And up till yesterday, I would have introduced myself as strategic advisor in non-communicable diseases and innovation in the World Health Organization, where I've had a very long career together with my wife, who is here in the front. And we've been around the world in quite a few places. And it's so wonderful symbolically to start the retirement by meeting you all. So the idea behind this talk is that we discuss the fact that I think is innate in every engineer in the room, that code changes lives. And maybe you don't think about it in your everyday, when you're meeting targets, when you're having your stand-up. But in reality, this is what happens. And you might be aware that it does so indirectly. We have so many reports of young people becoming addicted to social media, about people's attention being taken away from them, about surveillance capitalism, and you might have misgivings at times as to how well or deeply you are involved in these things. But what I want to talk about today is how code changes lives directly, how it intervenes or is used as part of an intervention, whether in clinical or in public health. Who am I? As soon as you all voted this as a talk, I changed my Twitter profile image to illustrate the fact that I have been a long-time Pythonista. I started programming in 1982 when I got my first ZX Spectrum. I actually see people around the room who might even remember those. I published my first program in 1984, and I have been programming ever since. I've been an exception in my peer group. I'm an executive in the organization, and yet do my night job as my data scientist. So not displacing anyone's job, but just doing it out of love. So this illustrates the two lives, and no more of an illustration than the fact that the last time I made a speech in Prague, it was in Parliament. And there I was talking about tobacco and alcohol control. And here I am today talking about my secret weapon, Python, that I was using in the background throughout a quarter-century career. So for those of you who are not public health aware, I'll just download a few basic points on public health. If you were to say what is the Zen of public health, it would be this. Donald Acheson in the 1980s defined public health as the science and art of preventing disease, prolonging life, and promoting health through the organized efforts of society. And in this room, I would like to focus on the science, the engineers, the art, the creativity, and the organized efforts of society. And for me, it's become clear in my reading and in my everyday experience that code is part of the organization of society. Even the implementation of legislation and its enforcement is based on underlying code somewhere in the system. Not only that, but public health has its own standard library or its go-to modules when we work. And we call these the essential functions, and there are many definitions. I've chosen here, because it's pretty, to illustrate the essential functions of public health with the color wheel of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through that, but I like the fact that it categorizes the work that we do under assessment, under policy development, and under assurance. And there are many sub-functions. You will find many definitions of the standard library. There is not one way to do it in public health, but it's enough. And I came here fully prepared to say, quite arrogantly, it's even in the abstract, that Python is absent from public health. But even just public health is here already. So I've spent the last 2 days attending your presentations and making a shout out to a few. So if we just look through the program, yesterday, Florian presented a talk about creating and collecting real-world evidence in order to have high-quality data sets on which trials for novel drugs and cancer treatment could be evaluated. Soon after, Tamara was there. She presented a process of embedding fairness and equity in AI and data pipelines, integrated with scikit-learn, and giving a wonderful example of diabetes inequities in the United States. Then, just a few minutes ago, Helena and Marina presented prenatal diagnosis using Python, and today there is this explosion of talks that I don't have time to go through them one by one, and sadly there is the one on epidemic modeling and responses that is happening coincident with this time. So thank you for making the sacrifice and attending my talk instead of that one. I'm not sure I would have made the same choice, but that's a joke. Thank you for being here. So if we just even take these, and I'm sure I've left out others, I haven't scoured every last abstract, we actually have a mini Masters in Public Health, even in EuroPython 2025. We have people who are working on health information. My shout out to Yanis, who is working on a very interesting project for mapping disaster relief coordination using OpenStreetMap. So we have the red part of the circle well represented. We have people who are working on population screening, prenatal screening, clinical and population-based approaches. We have Tamara's project, which is looking at the heart of the color wheel, all about equity. And I myself, happily, was not going to overlap with any of those. And I'm focused very much on the green part of the circle, what I call code as activism. And what I would like to do is tell you 3 very short war stories from the past decade that shows how, in the background, Python, and especially data visualization, has been used in my experience and with my team in order to gain new insights or to persuade people to adopt new regulations or health promotion. I will start with an unexpected encounter. I was doing one thing and found another. This is the politics of vaping. And I know we may not agree on some of the things I'm about to say, and will do so happily within the code of conduct, which is excellent, by the way, for this conference. One Saturday night, because what do we do on a Saturday night, of course, I was downloading Twitter posts, tweets, and I downloaded about 30,000 tweets covering a period of 2 weeks. In those days, shall I call them the good old days, Twitter allowed you to download, they had a good SDK, they had a good API interface, and you could download 2 weeks worth of tweets on any subject with any hashtag. And I thought I'll do a demonstration for my colleagues to show them how insightful it could be if one looked at a subject on Twitter. And so I did. But when I then plotted the count, it seemed like in the first part of the data, there was nothing really interesting. There was this low level of conversation that was happening. But then I saw on a particular moment, and now I shift the axis. Before it was counts of tweets per hour, now it's tweets per minute. There were these two very intense, very strong spikes of conversation, and I looked at what the tags, the hashtags were on those tweets, and it was quite interesting that the lower layer, there's like a trifle of 3 layers. The lower layer, I'll describe it. This is more to give you the illustration, and there's the link to see the Reveal.js slides. But the blue layer is e-cigarettes, as you might expect. All of them have e-cigarettes in the hashtag. And then the other 2 layers are health and lifesaver. And I thought, how very interesting that suddenly there should be this massive conversation about health and life-saving in the context of vaping. And it turned out that this was a heated debate, including a lot of criticism of WHO, my own organization, at exactly the same day or in the hours before, the European Commission was due to debate whether to tax electronic cigarettes as a tobacco product. And so I was interested, pulled out my network X, did some looking around at the people and the accounts involved. And remember, this was February 2015, well before Brexit. And the conversation was involving some very strange, to myself at the time, right-wing populist publications and politicians who rose to prominence and, dare I say, are still at a level of prominence today. A lot of work happened after this. This was not published beyond the GitHub repo, where you can see it from the link. But a lot of work went into this. A colleague of mine looked at the conversations on Brexit on Facebook and found a huge cluster related to tobacco. And in fact, the impingement on sovereignty by these non-elected bureaucrats became one of the big debating points that led to what happened in, well, you know history. But fast forward, we continue to do a lot of that work, and my case studies are like this. There's going to be a story, and then a fast forward, many things happen. And in the past year, we've really looked into this and published what I think are excellent canonical works on the links between politics, commercial interests, and the non-communicable disease epidemic of Europe. Non-communicable diseases, for those who don't know, heart attacks and strokes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory disease, among others. A second case study is one on women's health and violence against women. This one is a different case study. It's not political, it's very technical, but hey, thank goodness for Python in this case, because one Friday afternoon, my staff give me a document that has a lot of pages like this. You don't need to read it because it was unreadable. Indeed, what I did at that time was I called my staff member and I said, this is what I'm going to do to your report. And then I dunked it into the dustbin very nicely, because I said, we can't publish this. These were bitmaps. No way of extracting the data, no metadata. Somewhere in this form, spreadsheets, and we were supposed to publish this very quickly for a governing body meeting that was going to discuss the findings for a women's health strategy for Europe. Python to the rescue. I took up the challenge, wrote a notebook I wrote a small common library, a notebook per illustration. You can see all of that on the GitHub. emitted a bootstrap-powered interactive website that allowed us to have each of the graphs in common format and very nicely, but also produced editorial notes identifying when metadata sources and dates were missing. It also allowed the downloads of the different forms and also graphics that were interactive in themselves, Plotly based, that could export to SVG and go into the publication, smoothing out. So I'm not a bad boss. I didn't just throw it away. I took the week that was necessary in order to do this work, but I am fully aware that without Python, this would not have been available. So all hail and thank you to our common language. Fast forward, almost 10 years later from that report, you will see now that we have in WHO, even as I leave, there is now a special initiative on violence against women. You might have noticed that the graph I was repeatedly showing towards the end was the very high and unacceptable tolerance to so-called wife beating that comes out in UNICEF surveys in some countries of the European region. And so this special initiative is not only timely, it is urgent and essential. 10 years later, at least we have one. Next, and final case study is gamifying cardiovascular disease, heart disease and stroke. And you might say, how, this is a very serious thing, why gamify it? The very real point is that we work with ministers. Ministers have short attention spans and high amount of policy demands. They also have a short life expectancy. I mean, as a minister, I don't mean in real life. So they have to do things fast, and they're being asked to do things left, right, and center. And so there must be ways of presenting to them the same data over and over again. And this is one effort that I made at one point, saying to a gathering of such ministers in Moscow in 2017, I showed them this spaghetti graph saying these are the 53 countries, and this is how they are faring on a very important indicator. A lot of men die young in Europe. This is, as we focus on women, I thought it would be useful to just give a shout out to the men as well. That there is, we take it almost as a biological fact that men don't live that long as much as women, but in reality, there are reasons why they don't do so. And this graph starts to tease out regions of Europe. The red traces are the countries of the Commonwealth of Independent States, the former Soviet Union. The green lines refer to the countries in the European Union who joined after 2004. And the blue lines are the countries who belonged to the European Union before 2004. And if we summarize those graphs, we can see the archetypal experience of mortality in these countries. And we discussed this presentation with, and there's a lot to be said, but the sign there says stop, because we want to give time to the discussion. But there's a lot of stories to be told about what those spikes mean, why some countries are higher and lower. And it becomes a data visualization exercise, very simple on matplotlib. You could do it in half an hour, but it actually fed a 3-day conversation looking at the period of decline, doing a thought experiment of shifting the declines backwards to imagine that these were the declines of one specific country, and then doing a 3-day exercise on leapfrogging. What could the laggards do that the leaders had done and stop all the intervening political problems and bureaucratic issues? In the years since, we've done many such visualization and play exercises with new ministers, with new groups of policymakers, talking about bullseye charts, meeting the challenge, the 100-week challenge, and the quick buys that maybe you will vote in another speech in next EuroPython. So, what I would like to do is to use you as my co-participants in forging a vision of how we could have more of this, more Python, even low-level Python. I'm not talking here about high-level uses of the language. I think I want to inspire in my next career young people in the public health career, in computational biology, in engineering and software engineering, to consider that you can make a difference and directly change the context in which people live and improve the health of those people. So may I ask you to take out your phone and to scan this point. You will find yourself taken to a form where you will be asked to answer this question in any way that you like, to make up to 3 suggestions on how might there be a win-win arrangement between Python and its community with a concept of what I am calling an open source public health operating system, whether it's in the red, in the blue, in the yellow, or in the green, or in the center of that wheel. It would be interesting to have your suggestions as we go down to the conclusion. It's impossible to make an exhaustive list of all the tools that I used, but I list a few on the left. And it's impossible to list all the people that I have to thank who worked with me in this period, but I make an effort to thank and to acknowledge the most important ones. I also thank you for the vote and for the presence and for the smiles that I've seen as I was presenting. So thank you for, I was very anxious that a presentation with no code might end up being less attractive to you than others. I'm Gauden in all the places where I lurk and hopefully will participate more actively. The LinkedIn connection is there, as well as the download for the slides in both PDF and PowerPoint form. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. That was great. Do we have any questions from the audience right now? Was it all crystal clear? Okay.
This was fantastic. It was my favorite talk in the whole conference.
Thank you, Tamara.
An absolute role model. My question is, I haven't finished writing the suggestion for the joint vision, but we all have a lot of different skills. I myself, I'm more in the machine learning space. And how can we actually get involved in this kind of efforts with our skills that we have? They're quite specialized in a sense.
I'm being very humble and modest about it. I no longer talk with the weight of the organization behind me, but of course I have my connections in the system. What I would love is for all of us who are interested in, get onto LinkedIn. Let's try and see if we can set up some sort of conversation that's Python related, that's public health related for those who are interested, and see where it takes us, not to make it too ambitious. I will look very carefully at what you put into the form And there's an AI prompt waiting in the background to produce a report. So I'll also upload the report in the same repository. We'll see where it takes us, and reach out on LinkedIn, and we see what happens after this, between now and 2026. Maybe by then there's a public health group that makes its presentation and has its session in EuroPython next year.
Amazing, thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Tamara. Your work is really great, and I hope you appreciate the shout out.
Thanks. Do we have any more questions, concerns, comments? No? Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.